The opinions, viewpoints, and beliefs presented on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the management, the affiliates and broadcast partners, or the sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
And good evening, everyone, and welcome to Scarefest Radio. I'm your host, Wes Forsyth. The original broadcast date is May 10th, 2019. Is this Mother's Day weekend? I'm gonna actually try not to drop the F-bomb tonight in honor of everyone's mother. Because I got in trouble from somebody's mother for doing it a few shows ago. So anyway, welcome to the show. Tonight, my co-host is Mr. Chad Harlan. And I want to say, Chad, you're getting really good at this last minute BS that I keep throwing at you. I just basically forgot that I didn't have a co-host tonight. And I said, oh, well, Sutton's out of town, and I just talked to him like a week ago. So, Chad, you're up. And then our guest what? I was going to say, you seem to always be home, Chad. You always seem to be home. Then, of course, our guest tonight is the lovely, talented, and psychically enhanced Pat O'Keefe. And,
hello, everyone.
And Pat, before the night's over, I will call you Pat Boussard. You can count on it.
Okay, that's fine.
Now, everyone, I'm going to tell you a quick story. The way I found out that Pat Boussard was Pat O'Keefe was I was actually booked at a convention that she was at, and I'm going through the headliners or the guest list and everything, and I'm going, who the hell is Pat O'Keefe? And I saw the picture and I said, that's not Pat O'Keefe. But Pat is actually one of the first psychic mediums that I met when I was in the paranormal field. So, she's got that going on. And a little side story about Pat. Now, Pat, I tell this story all the time. Listeners, you've heard me tell the story of, I think it was the first year I actually spoke at Scarefest. I was off the rails. I was excited. I was happy. I was throwing energy around like it's free. And I walked up to your booth, Pat. I don't know if you remember it, but you looked at me and you said, oh, thank God that I know who you are. You would have scared the shit out of me because of my aura.
Yeah, I remember we were talking. Of course, I'm a psychic and a medium, but you're someone that I call a spiritual warrior. So, I mean, I can identify if there's a negative energy in someone's life, but it's people like you that are able to connect with them to actually help relieve that kind of burden for them. So I definitely remember our first conversation.
Yeah, our first conversation was at, I want to say Corbin, Kentucky. I think it was. I'm not sure, but I do remember it was a small con, and I hadn't actually been in radio all that long, and I was just walking around, and I got a reading from Pat, got a tarot card reading. That's a good question, Pat. Okay, went to your website, everybody. If you want to play the home version, unless she's got a new one, it's patboussard BUSSARD.com. Now. This is going to sound like a very, very, very suggestive question, but in all of your photographs, you're holding balls. And of course, I mean crystal balls, everybody. But every time I've seen you, you read tarot cards. What's with the crystal balls?
The crystal, well, actually, I also do scrying and in different ways. And if you look at scrying throughout the millennia, so to speak, I mean, it's mentioned over and over. There were holy wells where people would look into the calm waters and focus their energy and see things, from the future and the past and the present that had not been revealed to them in normal, through our normal senses. And then, of course, crystal balls themselves, quartz crystal actually oscillates. It vibrates, and that's why it's used in watches. It's alive. It's full of energy, and so it represents the psychic sphere, if you will, of existence. And so I do use crystal balls. I've got the one that I use is a beautiful, solid, natural crystal ball, and I named it Artemis, because of the wisdom of that particular goddess energy, if you will. So it just simply represents the psychic end of things, so to speak. But now I don't really use tarot much anymore. I've always said that tarot for someone like me is almost like training wheels, and I had to learn how to dance, and now I have, to the point where whenever somebody sits down and I focus my energy, I'm able to go into a trance state that we call, alpha state. And this state of consciousness can actually be, it can be tracked, and, biorhythm, biofeedback. It can actually show the brain at work in alpha. Alpha is, the few minutes between sleep and awake. Something like, I heard a statistic, I don't know if it's true or not, but that like 80% of psychic phenomena is reported by people who are in that in-between state. It's really a trance state where your mind, body, and spirit is in transition between wakefulness and the other world, so to speak, or the dream world.
That's when I meditate. That's what I try to get into. And I got decent at it for a while, but lately I've just got like. Now it's funny you call tarot lazy. Of course, everybody that watches the show regularly knows that I do really bad tarot card readings. Pat had to defend me to somebody at one of the cons we were at together because I kept getting these cold stares across the floor. And finally the person said, "Do you know that guy?" And Pat looked up, saw who it was, and said, "Don't worry about him."
Yeah, I did. And I think I said too, I've not seen any attachments. So I think you're fine. You don't need his services. I remember telling, because we all, the thing about people in the paranormal, and by that, I mean people who are connected in a psychic sense beyond, our normal senses, if you will. We all have our different gifts. And, mine are specific to me, yours are specific to you. And it's really interesting too, because, and I'm going to rant just a little bit, Wes, because this has really impacted my life, if you will, are people who really want to connect in some way, and they may come for a reading, but it's like that scene out of, Practical Magic, where it's like they hide the fact that they've come to you, or you know what I'm saying? It's like, well, I need this energy and I will connect to it, but then I'm going to withdraw and pretend like I don't know you. Yeah. So it's like, if you're going to embrace one of us, or if you need the services of one of us, I would just ask that anyone who does that to be polite enough to at least acknowledge that we are people and you connected with us, and it's okay if you got a reading. I think that there's still pockets in America, well, anywhere, in some parts of the world, it can actually mean death for someone like me to be out of the psychic closet, so to speak, in places like Africa, in parts of India. It's very real to have the challenge, if you will, of having gifts and sharing those gifts without being drug out of your house and burnt or murdered because of those gifts. It's it's so troubling to me in this modern world that I've been working on a series of photographs for an exhibit, and I call it What Witches Do. And the first photograph is actually a compilation of many different headlines from around the world of people who are being biased against, if you will, in the most heinous types of way, including, killing and death, for people who simply have a gift that someone else may not have. And it shows people, some of them are actual witches, and that's part of this series is, can you spot the witch? No, you can't. But it's one of the last vestiges, if you will, in America where we can be biased or bigoted against someone. Now, I am not, a witch per se, but I do have friends who are pagan and walk that path, and it's a very difficult path for them, as difficult for them as it is for me being a psychic and a medium, because folks, I worked in higher education, and that by definition means that I had an entire, colleague filled employment area where, everyone was had some sort, and I shouldn't say everyone, but most people had some sort of negative thinking or had, made a connotation that was negative between, someone who was psychic and their world view, because you have to have a wider worldview. If you are in the paranormal, and for your listeners out there, this really is not about them, because their world is so much bigger than what many people's worlds are. And if that world is threatened, sometimes it can result in some really nasty flashback for the person or persons where, where they're pushing against. And I'll give you an example. There's two men, and they opened a metaphysical shop with tarot card reading in Richlands, Virginia. And so the town actually came up with all these laws all of a sudden to prevent them from being able to read tarot. Well, all of a sudden we have the ACLU that just announced that they're picking up this case because tarot card reading is part of these gentlemen's path. But it was really interesting because here I am working for the local college and watching this kind of bigotry and listening to someone in administration at the time when I said, it's really terrible, what's being done to these men. I see it as nothing but religious bigotry. And I was told, well, I think that, this is something that our town doesn't need. So it still exists. So I'm hoping to finish this series in a couple of years, and I'm hoping to get it exhibited someplace. So maybe we can get back together whenever that happens.
The way it looks, I will be here. Everybody, we're going to take our first commercial break. We will be right back with more Scarefest Radio with Pat O'Keefe, and I'll turn it over to Chad when we get back. Have you checked out the Mama Ruby's family of metaphysical and spiritual shows? The Mystical Fair in Lexington, Kentucky, Lexington's only monthly psychic and holistic healing arts fair. The Inner Light Festivals in Louisville in June and Lexington in November. And watch for Mama Ruby's Expo coming in 2020. Plus, Mama Ruby's Meta Lecture Series, featuring interesting guests speaking on fascinating subjects. Start your journey now at mamarubies.com for more information. And welcome back to Scarefest Radio. Don't forget, everybody, the Mystical Fair Lexington. Lexington's only monthly psychic and holistic healing arts fair coming up May 25th and 26th. And then the Inner Light Festival is just like a month away. June 1st, June 2nd in Louisville, Kentucky. Go to innerlightfestival.com. And now, Chad, over to you.
Good evening. Pat, thanks for being with us and taking some time to talk to us tonight. I kind of want to go back. You've been talking about some of your gifts and how you use them. Can you kind of tell us how you discovered your gifts?
It was less of a discovery than really just growth. I was about 3.5 when I had my first, contact with an incorporeal spirit. It was my mother who was astral projecting. I come from a family of astral projectors. And I was 3.5. My father was working in Fairbanks, Alaska, because he worked for the Air Force. And we were in that gray in between stage of the, when it's really twilight, 24 hours a day. And so my mother had like little lights, night lights on. But I was sitting there and I just see my mother, and she kind of floats into the room and I see her lay, across her body. And then I just see body and spirit kind of mesh together, if you will. So I also come from a family of very talented psychics and mediums. And so my mother and my grandmother, I grew up reading things like Mysteries of the World. And my grandmother, had some magical texts that were around the house. I was just reading all of these things. And my worldview was just extremely broad because of these two incredible women. And so when I did have experiences, I could talk to them. And my grandmother in particular, was willing to share her, her experiences with me.
That's an interesting way to come about it, especially so young and to have an experience like that. As you've developed, and I know you're an investigator and a photographer, when you do the investigations, do you find yourself relying on one of those tools more than the other, or have you figured out a way to kind of mesh them well together, your technical side versus your psychic side?
I will tell you that I trust my psychic side more than I do equipment. And I'm not by myself. If the grandfather of parapsychology was Dr. Hans Holzer. He literally wrote the original book for modern parapsychologists, modern people who have questions about the paranormal and want answers. And he said that there were 3 things that you needed in order to conduct a proper investigation. One was a reporter, one was a camera, and the third was a trance medium. And he would select a medium. He would often work with Sybil Leek, who was a well-known witch from England. And he would not tell whoever he was taking, the trance medium, where he was going. And wherever in the world, he would just land with this woman. And then she, usually a woman, not always, but then she would channel the spirits in the location. And he was able to confirm, at least to his satisfaction, that there is truth in the mysterious. It's the best way to put that. So the more I've done this, and I know that this is really controversial, but it's just incredible. Like, one of my passions is past lives. And I'm actually getting a certification in consulting hypnosis because I'm so fascinated by them. But I had someone come to me, and I can often see past lives. And I was able to tell her name. Told her that she died during the Second World War in the Sea of Japan. I said she was English. I told her that she was not a nurse, but she worked aboard a ship that was a medical ship. And because I had her name, I was actually able to trace her. I love the Brits. They keep fastidious records, and many of them are online. I was able to find her. Oh, and I had told her that she died within 5 minutes. Her ship was a medical ship. It was torpedoed by the Germans, and the whole entire ship sank in 5 minutes. So, when you have that kind of, feedback, if you will, it just becomes even more fascinating. So I've been studying quite a bit about past lives, reincarnation. I mean, most of the world believes in reincarnation. A lot of people don't realize that Orthodox Jews believe in reincarnation. In fact, they say that so many souls were lost during World War II that not all of them were able to come back into the community. And so you actually have Jewish souls who have reincarnated into Gentile bodies, so to speak. So it's absolutely fascinating stuff. But when you start reading about it and cases where they have been able to, find, names, dates, one child would talk about bombers and airplanes, and he had knowledge that there was no way this child could have knowledge of these specific airplanes, and found out that he had been a pilot who had died, some years back. And there's just case after case. I could go on and on. Usually with children, because children remember, at least until the memories start to fade, which is fascinating also. So anyway, I kind of took a turn there on you.
That's great.
You can guide me back.
Well, let's kind of build off that. You talked about the children kind of having still a memory. I know there's some ideas out there that children are more sensitive too, and they might lose that ability. Has that been your experience, or?
I find that children aren't more sensitive; they're just more open. There is a difference. And they're open because their mother hasn't looked at them for the first time and said, don't dare say that in public, because if you do, they're going to think you're strange. And one of the things that we are programmed biologically not to be is the other, because the other can cost you your life. I just mentioned, people who have gifts in some countries on earth are still in danger of losing their lives because people don't understand it. They're afraid of it. They've been told it's bad. They've been told that it's evil. And so, and when people are whipped into a religious fury, they're capable of doing things that, normally people would not do, because if you have God on your side, you cannot do any wrong, and people lose their compass at times because of that. Yeah. Great. Keep guiding me.
Oh no, you're doing great, and you're making this very easy. But right now, let's kick it back over to Wes.
Yeah, this is like shooting fish in a barrel. I've made more notes off your conversation than I've made in the last year. But most of them have nothing to do with you. It's about my own life. I'd see. Now, I didn't know that you did past life. Of course, like I said, I think other than the tarot card reading and the time that you told me that I was my aura looked like I was on fire. That's really our only real psychic interaction. Right. But now I do want to ask you. I've past life, and I believe in reincarnation, and I've actually been able to fit it into my Judeo-Christian beliefs. I don't have a big conflict there. But the thing about it is, I have this gut feeling. Now, I went to one past life person that it was a cold reading. I'm sorry, she had no talent. It was bullshit. I'm sorry. I haven't seen her for several years, so I can say that I'm sure she's not watching the show. Another one tried. But I didn't feel it. But I am thoroughly convinced that my past lives, I have been this mundane middle management type guy who died of a heart attack when he was like 70 or 80 years old. Whereas I didn't die in battle. I wasn't an Egyptian king. I did have one psychic tell me that I was not a pharaoh, but some big Egyptian thing, and I'm like, no, I have been a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant before they were even in style.
I would tell you that's the thing about past lives. Like when when I was able to connect with that woman, and I forget her name now. This is terrible. I think it was Margaret something. But when I was able to trace that, she worked as a volunteer on a medical ship putting up cans. That was her major job. You see what I'm saying? She was just a grunt. She was, but she had a huge heart. I mean, she had all these wonderful things about her to have put her on that ship, to try to help the war effort. That's who we are. We're just people, and we follow these paths. But now this is what I find fascinating. Is if I can see something, I want to be able to take my notes, but to put somebody into hypnosis, take them back and help them if I need to. If they have a question, if they're confused, I can ask a few questions, or you see what I'm saying, but stay out of it. Let them connect with their past life, because hypnosis can be a very powerful tool for people to be able to connect with their past lives. Now, sometimes I get very powerful images, and you guys are going to laugh. And I'm going to tell you a story, and this is a true story, because you have to understand, people out there, Scarefest tribe, that we as readers get all kinds of questions and people. I had this gentleman come in, and he leaned over into my personal space, and he said, "I'm impotent." Now, wait. I said, yes, I can, I was connecting with that. I said, yes, I kind of feel this. And I feel that you have a girlfriend that you're having difficulty with. But about that time, I'm not kidding you. It was like, when I tell you my family astral projects, when you astral project, it's not just somewhere on Earth. It can be somewhere in time and space. And even Einstein said that, our concept of time and space is very narrow to what it truly is. And so you're in this time and space. But what I saw was this cop, and this cop was like smacking around. He had that black helmet on that they used to wear, and this black itchy wool suit. And I knew that he was either in Chicago, New York, or London. I mean, you just know these things. And it was the gaslight era. But I saw him smacking these women around. Now think about it. They were women of the night. So when we talk about karma, karma isn't revenge. Karma is balance. So he thought he was better than the hoes of that time. He thought that they were wicked and terrible, and he was so morally superior to them. So when he comes into this lifetime, guess what happens? The very thing that they made their money from to survive a place like Whitechapel, London, during a time when it may have been the only resource that these women had, and that's still true in some areas of the world today. Then he comes into this world and it's balanced, because he cannot do what they got paid to do. You see what I'm saying? It's just amazing when you start looking at karma.
Yeah, but now I'm disappointed, because all of my detractors that I was looking forward to karma catching up with, it's going to happen later. I won't even be here.
You know what? You give that over to divine providence. You really do.
Now, while we're on the topic of past life, now one thing that I feel in my gut. Now, one thing I think I have talked to you about my spirit guides. I've got my little posse of spirit guides. I feel like, with the exception of one of them he's been on TV, he's like, I don't know what, he's important. He's important in the afterlife, people. But the rest of us are just these dudes, and I feel like it's kind of our thing is just like, next time it's the other guy's life. In other words, and then I'll be his spirit guide because I'm so damned wise. Is that something that I just pulled out of thin air, or is that something that happens in past lives, where, in other words, you've got a life, but you don't necessarily reincarnate right away? In other words, you've got other things while you're other shit to do.
Right. I know what you're saying, and I wish I had all the answers like you and other wise people in the world. And
one answer I got, and it could be wrong. Okay, go ahead.
We are learning as we go. But here's the thing, that this is where we get in trouble. When we start thinking, number one, that we have all the answers, and number two, that anything isn't possible. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Now, what you mentioned, I absolutely could see, and I'll tell you why. I have a woman right now, and who's a friend of mine, very dear friend, and I have connected with one of her spirit guides, which she already knew this person, but when I described him and who he was, it was like tears. She knew immediately. He has been with her in previous lives, but chose not to reincarnate in this lifetime so that he could guide her for a reason. Exactly what you said. Yes.
There. Me
There
and
you go.
Philip, drinking buddies for the life of the universe. We're going to take our second commercial break, everybody. You're watching Scarefest Radio. Our guest tonight is Pat O'Keefe. Do you feel lost in life? Do you seem to be stuck in emotions that are not yours? Is your home not the sanctuary it should be? Contact Spirit Mechanics, where they take a team approach to your metaphysical and spiritual problems. Spirit Mechanics specializes in aura cleansing, stone attunement, attachment removal, and house cleansings. Spirit Mechanics tailors their approach to your individual spiritual path and needs. Find them every month at Lexington, Kentucky's Mystical Fair, mysticalfairlex.com, or on Facebook by searching Spirit Mechanics, that's MECHANIX. Spirit Mechanics, for your spiritual health and well-being. Everyone is talking about CBD oil. Most of us know that CBD is a cannabis compound that has significant medical benefits, but does not make people high. Its benefits include pain relief, anti-seizure properties, anxiety relief, fights cancer, reduces the risk of diabetes, and it is even used as a sleep aid. Blue Leaf Naturals CBD and hemp products are full-spectrum hemp extract oils. They use only hemp grown in Kentucky, supporting Kentucky farmers and businesses and helping you and your family stay healthy and well. Blue Leaf Naturals, created with care from seed to shelf. Visit their website at blueleafnaturals.com. Blue Leaf Naturals, a Kentucky proud company. And welcome back, everybody, to Scarefest Radio. Our guest tonight is Pat O'Keefe. Quick reminder, coming up at the next Mystical Fair, May 25th and 26th in Lexington, Kentucky, you can meet the Spirit Mechanics in person. Just don't get there early. They have this real bad habit of staying up a little too late. Everybody, we're going to go over to Chad now.
Switching gears a little, I know you have a connection to St. Albans. In fact, you've written a book on it. Can you tell us a little about the location and what you wrote about in that?
Yes, absolutely. The first time I ever went to St. Albans, I was actually on assignment for Ghost Voices magazine, which was this fabulous magazine out of the UK. And when I walked in, it was like, oh my gosh, I love this place. And I could tell because these types of haunted locations, if you will, have an energy. And I could tell that I was supposed to write this book for St. Albans. And so when I started researching this, and by the way, I worked with Marcel Hanauer, Tracy Oster, and who else? Oh, there was one other. I swear to come to me. I apologize. But anyway, these wonderful people from St. Albans. And I wrote, took this on, took about a year and a half of research to write the book. It actually sits on the second oldest river in the world, according to geologists, and it is the New River. It's right there. I mean, whoop, there's St. Albans, and then the river runs in front of it. Now, another thing that's interesting is there's a series of limestone caverns underneath St. Albans. And what's beautiful about this is St. Albans is one of those rare places that never gets depleted. of energy, because we have the hydroelectric energy basically that is just rushing past, and the old sanatorium is literally pulling energy from that, or I should say the spirits that are manifesting within it, and its own energy is. And then, of course, the same thing with the limestone caverns, you have that earth energy that is being pulled. And not only is it never depleted, or at least never when I was there, and I have been there a lot, but you also have this incredible variety of spirits, entities, and manifestations that take place there. One of the rarest things that can happen is a time slip. And I actually witnessed this myself. I was with two other investigators, so we have witnesses. We were going up the steps. We were going to this place within the building called the bird cage. And what it was, it's an actual cage. They had wire, all the way around it. It was on the second floor, and it was to keep the patients from literally flinging themselves off the second floor, but also it gave them a place where they could have some sunshine. So we go up to the second floor, and I turn to my left, and there is no hallway, none. I'm like, what? And at that moment, Scarlett McGrady was with us, and she said, oh my God, Pat, I can see my breath. Now, I went back and checked on Weather Underground to make sure. That day, the weather outside was about 68 degrees. There was no way that we should be seeing our own breath inside the sanatorium. So I was so befuddled, if you will, that I actually went to the wall, put my hand on the wall, and went all the way down the hallway and then all the way back. Well, we decided to go into the old classroom. So we walked up the hall, went in, and we sat there. Now, you have to understand that St. Albans was built during the Victorian era. So the wood is like this. I mean, around the wood or around the doors, the wood framing. Mm-hmm. So when we stepped out, our human barometer, Scarlett said once again, oh my God, Pat, it's warm now. And I thought, oh my God, did we just witness a time slip? And I looked straight down that hall, and I swear to you, I could see the wood. It was this thick, sticking out from the wall. Went running down there. There it is again. This massive doorway to the which you take to the birdcage. And it was really funny because I was ready to go, and Scarlett's like, I am not stepping through that. She said, Pat, what would happen if we were on the other side and this would happen? And I'm like, you don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to bet that's not going to happen, because the energy that had to happen for that to have happened, it had to have been at least, if not depleted, then I don't think that there would be a repeat right away anyway. Now, what's interesting about this, it wasn't just our experience. There have been others who have experienced the same thing. So not there, but in other parts of the building. And I actually have another story in the book about someone else's experience. But what's really interesting is I called their historian, and I said, Shelley Sprouse Mead. That was the name that I was missing. I called Shelley and I said, Shelley, I have to ask, was that hallway always there? Was the hallway always there since the building has been built, and the and the birdcage? And she said, no, Pat. That hallway was not built until 1916. Score! So we were just so, well, you know how it is with people like us. I mean, things like that really excite us. The story that's in the book about another person's experience, they actually were in a room, could not find the door. They went around the room with their hands on the wall doing the hand, because that's all you know to do, right? It's like, what? So they did the same thing. Now, it's really cool because one of the people in that group was a doctor, another was a nurse, and another was a librarian. I mean, these are all, I'm not saying we're all not normal, but you know what I'm saying. People that, have some, I guess, validity and this sort of thing, that wouldn't be more apt to make this sort of thing up because of reputation, yada, yada. I don't know. But anyway, it's really interesting. It's not just that. It's like there's crawlers that are there. and by these little black like beasties are there. There's this thing that we call the smiler, and the smiler will be up on and like those old steam pipes that go across the the roof or ceiling. He actually fell out of one once, right in front of a couple, and smiled upside down. And they say that his face, I've never seen him myself, but his face, it's like all you see is this huge, scary, upside down smile. There's a gentleman we call the shuffler who, and his actions remind you a great deal of, what you would have seen with someone on lithium during the day. And that is he's drooling, he's kind of like this, he's kind of shuffling. So there's a shuffler. There are, during the Civil War, there was a Union, unit that was actually on the banks of the New River right there. They've been seen. There's it was a Union Confederate soldier that has been seen several times within the building. There's the Hat Man, if you've ever heard of him within,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. The realm of the of the shadow people, he has been spotted there. I mean, it's just fantastic. The manifestation, the entities, and the ghosts that are there. They're just so plentiful. The one that really, and I have to tell the story, it's just so sad. The one that really tugs my heart, my personal experience there. I was with Jennifer Woodward Prophet. She's another investigator and another psychic. She came running out of what we call Donald's room. Now, Donald was accused of raping and strangling this child. Oh, it's so sad. But anyway, so I told her, I said, do not tell me what you experienced. And she said, well, stand 18 inches from the wall. So I did. And then all of a sudden, I feel this little hand, and it's pushing me, like trying to get me out of the way, right? And when you think about that, I thought, oh, this poor little thing just wants me gone. But when you think about that in a more deep manner, it's really disturbing, if you get my drift. I mean, this was Donald's room. It wasn't his room. So, it's pretty sad. And sometimes that's the way it is. But if you ever have an opportunity to travel to St. Albans, I can tell you, just connecting with her energy, and it is a she. There's actually, in Victorian symbolism, she has this symbol, which is like a thistle of somewhere that takes in and supports and cares for individuals. And that's how she is. She's like New Orleans, Louisiana. It's one of those energies that you walk in, if you've been accepted, and she wants you to stay, and you'll know if she doesn't, because if she doesn't, you'll not get any of the pleasantness, and you will get plenty of dark surprises at times.
It sounds like a wonderful place to go and experience. I know that you mentioned there several times entities like the Smiler and shadow people and crawlers. Do you have, from your experience and your connections, any theories or ideas on what those are? Are they human, inhuman, elementals? Have you had any thoughts on that, or is that anything that you've looked at and worked on?
I haven't really, of course, in writing the book and listening to so many stories and really connecting with the energy of this place, it really seems like, I don't say this lightly, like everything in the kitchen sink. I mean, again, we're talking about the mighty New River. We're talking a series of limestone caverns. We're talking, the place itself, the sanatorium itself, has developed its own energy based, like Frankenstein, off of minutia energy that has just joined together to create this living, almost breathing, entity known as St. Albans. But within that, within that are the individual elementals, like you said, because it does cause one to wonder. I don't think that the crawlers have just been launched indiscriminately and just created out of air, but perhaps where there's this deep connection to both earth and water, they've been drawn to this energy. It's very much like one huge doorway.
Sounds amazing.
It is.
Let's toss it back over to Wes.
All right.
Everybody, we're going to take our final commercial break of the hour. When we come back, we're going to kind of get a quick preview of what Pat's going to be presenting at the Scarefest. We'll be right back.
Coyote Chris Sutton.
Shamanism.
Spiritual advisement.
Paranormal investigations.
Inspirational presentations.
Bringing light to the darkest places for over 20 years. Go to coyotechris.com to learn more. And everybody, don't forget, Akashic Awareness is also a sponsor of Scarefest Radio. They're a metaphysical healing and learning center, unlike any other in Kentucky. Crystals, gems, minerals greet you the minute you walk in, and that damn dog of theirs also. But check them out, AkashicAwareness.com. They're in Elizabethtown. And I didn't look at their schedule to see what they got coming up. They've always got a lot of readers and healers coming in on a rotating basis. Always something interesting going on at Akashic Awareness. See, Pat, blew through the hour. Absolutely blew through the hour. I didn't even get to all my notes here, like, why don't I like quartz? But let's go ahead, let's talk about it now. You're going to be speaking about spiritualism in the Victorian era and involving spirit boards and stuff. Give us a quick preview of that before we let you go.
Yes. Okay. For anyone who'd be interested in coming to our session, I will be presenting with Jennifer Woodward Prophet. I mentioned her earlier, and she is a palmist and a psychic. I have had a fascination with the late Victorian and Edwardian eras because my last lifetime took place in that, and I've had a nightmare about my death during that time over and over since I was about 5 years old. So I find it fascinating. I've done a lot of research and study. So people who will come, who decide to come to our presentation will not only get, some information about that era, and it was a fascinating era that was really a part of a death culture, or the death culture of the Victorian era, and because of course she lost her husband and she put the entire nation into mourning. But it wasn't just that. The First World War, happened a few years later. So we've got all these people who had passed from that. We've got people who died from disease and childbirth, yada yada. In the 1830s, if you were a mother in Liverpool, in the ghetto of Liverpool, England, and you had 10 children, you could expect to lose 6 of them by the age of 5. So people would start saving for a child's death, like we start saving for a child's education in today's world, in the Western world. Such a difference because they didn't really anticipate. I mean, the chances of them surviving past age 5 was very slim, depending on where you lived. So people were acquainted with death. They understood death. It didn't really have the negative connotation as much as it does today. In fact, they often equated it, like with the graveyard poets, with this whole idea of can't be a Kardashian because everything is vanity, like man's vanity with their looks and their money and what they own, because all you're going to end up with is the ashes of your body and the dirt that will be placed upon your grave. And so it was a very different era. So we'll talk a little bit about that, about the rise of spiritualism, of trying to, because we knew death so well and had lost so many people. connect with those who had crossed over. And so, the rise of spiritualism and how they did things then. Like, we are familiar with mediums now. We've had a resurgence. And when you think about it, the world has been a bit off kilter. So once again, we're all uncomfortable. We don't know what to expect. We want answers, what comes next. And some of that has been connected to a spiritual shift also, where we're suddenly more aware as a people, as humans, that we hope maybe that there's more than what our experience is now. So you'll get some of that, but you're also going to get a treat at the end. We're going to set up and take a couple of volunteers, and we're going to show you how a proper Victorian seance would have been conducted during that time. And it was very different because now we have a conversation. You may come to me, and I really won't channel unless you're very comfortable with that. But in Victoria, England, what I would do is I would just relax and I would let the spirit take over. And I am a trance medium. I'm a channeling type of medium when I am in my truest form. So you'll be able to kind of see that. And what you will experience if you ever attend a seance with someone like me is you may see someone's face kind of superimposed over mine. Or I had one woman that I was speaking with, and I kept doing this. I don't know if you can see my hands, but it was like this. And she said, "Oh my God." And I said, "What?" Because sometimes I'm not even aware of what I'm doing. And that's the channeling part. And she said he was a concert pianist. So, he was trying to show her that he was there. So anyway, I hope you can attend. Wes, thank you so much for having me on. Chad, you brought too. And I appreciate it. Oh, and catch me. I did get married. That's why I'm no longer a Bazaar. Cut that one. I'm now an O'Keefe. So it's Pat-O'Keefe.com, or you can still catch me at Pat Bussard, BUSSARD.com. Thank you. And Jennifer, you rock too. I look forward to doing this presentation with you.
And one last quick question. You mentioned that you kind of got your gifts through the family tree. You know how I feel about your daughters. Listeners, viewers, this woman has a gene pool you wouldn't believe. Her daughters are like drop dead gorgeous, and they're like nuclear physicists and doctors and lawyers. Did they get any of the family gift?
Actually, it's interesting. My daughter, Stephanie, she's the blonde. And she's the one that has little Annalise, my only grandchild. Thank you, Stephanie. But she is actually an animal communicator, and she's fabulous. She is really, she lives on a farm, and she doesn't really connect with people. She's very much an introvert, the total opposite of us, Wes. But she's very much an introvert that feels very comfortable with animals. And so, people come to her for these sorts of connections because there are people who, as we know, are deeply, deeply attached to their animals. And when they pass, it's very painful for them. So she does a lot of that. She could be very much a medium, but as I said, she prefers to deal with animal energy. And then Megan is my bodybuilder, and she is attending Appy State right now. Her life right now, you know how that is. It's just so busy and close to her. I'm hoping that later maybe she'll connect with some of her gifts, but if not, she'll have her own path to walk. Thank you, Wes, for that. I love them very much.
Hi, I'm just saying, I ran into him at your booth one time when you weren't there, and it was like, I didn't want to leave. I'm sorry. Everybody, this has been Scarefest Radio. It's been a great night. Don't forget, check out Pat and Jennifer's presentation at the Scarefest. We'll see you next week.